Here's why your birth identity will keep you trapped. Before I dive into this video, I just want to let you all know I'm not talking about gender identity, gender politics, all of that palaver, which might see people probably drop off now, but that's okay. And the ones that this is meant for will stick around, because I'm going to dive into the whole birth identity from a spiritual point of view. So with that being said, let's dive in. So I'm going to take this approach from kind of a chronological point of view. I'm going to talk about when we are first born. When we are first born, we are given a birth certificate. We are given an identity because of that's how kind of the way the world works. Where then we are told, well, this is who I am. The name given to me by my parents. We go and register that name. Then we go and say, well, this must be who I am. Because then our parents start feeding into that birth identity that they have given you. And so when we have, so this means from the beginning, we are given this identity as a human. We are told, well, this is who I am. I'm Christina Woodward, and you are Matthew, you are James, you are Sarah, for example. And so we believe, well, that must be who I am. And because we believe that's who we are, we start identifying with those things that are about us, that have been told about us. And your parents might say, well, you have this type of temperament, you have that type of temperament. And as we begin to grow, we develop and grow in age, this is when the sense of self is formed. And so we are told, well, this is who I am about myself. And so what happens then is the ego starts to identify with all of the things you have been told about yourself, all the things that your internal matrix has been programmed with. And what I mean by this is like your belief systems, your identity, what stories that have been programmed into your subconscious, what traumas and what things you have been through that kind of forms this internal matrix. And then the sense of self is based off of that. So we tell ourselves, well, this is who I am, because that's my ego. My ego wants to identify with all of these things about myself. It says, I am black, you are white, I am Hispanic, you are Chinese, like all of these different identities that we associate with, that we believe this is who I am. So this means the stronger the sense of self, the more the ego is identified with the birth certificate identity. That I am white, I'm from the UK, I am born in this part of the country, I was born here. So when we have that really strong sense of self, the ego will say, well, that is me, that is who I am. And if there's a weak sense of self, we kind of merge into needing somebody to tell us what to do. We don't have the individuation. Having a sense of self and the ego is not necessarily bad. We need the separation in order to be able to think for ourselves, in order to say, well, this is my belief, this is who I am, so I need to be able to think for myself and stand up for what I believe in. Because if there's this weak sense of self and there's no individuation, they need that person to tell them what to do. They're easily influenced by outside external factors to tell them how to show up in life. But having a strong sense of self is not necessarily always a good thing, because the stronger the sense of self, the easier the ego becomes triggered And the easier it is for disputes to happen, for wars to get created, because they say, well, this is me, I associate with this religion, I associate with this religion, I follow this religion, this is me, this is my heritage, this is my ancestral, this is my lineage, this is my land. And so this becomes ego against ego. And they have so strongly identified with the birth certificate, the identity, that they've been told their whole life, because they've been programmed with it from their external environment. They believe nothing else. They can't see past the ego. And this is why it will keep you trapped in life, because the ego will refuse to see things from a different point of view when you have that birth certificate identity. When you believe, well, that is who I am. That's just me. That's me. I am Christian. I'm Jewish. I'm Muslim. Whatever religion you identify with, the ego will just attach to that. And the same goes for our wounds and our traumas. The ego will say, well, I'm the victim here. And that's what the ego wants. It wants to play the victim. It wants to be in a role where it can play out and feel safe, because it likes the safety and the known. It doesn't want to say, well, it doesn't want anybody to question the identity that you've been given. Because when people start to question, well, we're all just part of God, or we don't need to have these identities given because we are just kind of one, and there's not really any separation, and we're all divine spiritual beings just having a human experience. And so people will be like, hold on a minute, no, that's not true. That's not true. I am Christopher from the UK somewhere. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't like to feel unsafe. So when we identify with the ego, it blocks us off from the spiritual self, from the spiritual identity, the true identity, the true self. So when we do start going through that awakening process, we discover the true self, that we are not this birth certificate identity, we're not this belief about ourselves, we're not the ego identity. And so then we can break free from that. We unlock the prison cell to ourselves. We have the key the whole time. And we can see that we are true divine spiritual beings. But then what can happen is then we identify, well, I'm a spiritual person, and that's where the spiritual ego comes into place. And that's not to say I've not experienced spiritual ego, because I believe we all must go through that initiation of the spiritual ego, believing like, oh, I'm spiritual and you're not. Because that's just another belief. It's just another identity that the ego wants to hold on to, because it wants order and structure to survive, help you survive. And being part of an identity helps us to remain safe. So it's not necessarily always a bad thing, but it's just not helpful. And it can keep us trapped and blocked off from seeing our true divine potential as a spiritual being and seeing the true self. Because nothing outside of us really exists. It's all from within. It's us creating everything from within. And so when we see that, we see that we hold the power. We hold the God spark within us. And that can become ignited when we stop seeing outside of us and identifying with our reality, identifying with our birth certificate, our beliefs. And I think that until majority of people realize this, we're still just going to see separation, division, and destruction in the world. When we are continuously so identified with our religions, our race, our ethnicity, where we live, we're not going to be able to ignite that light from within. We're just going to constantly be identified with our external environment and say that this is where I live, this is mine, this is me. And whilst that is true, we do have to identify with something, so we have kind of structure and order in place. But the true self, the true spiritual self, is the true identity, the God within. So I hope this video has been really helpful for you today. If you want to dive further on the true self and how you to transcend things in your shadow so you can embody that true divine self, check out this video next, Becoming Comfortable with the Uncomfortable in Shadow Work. Much love.